All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started. It is the top of the hour, so we're going to kick things off. Thank you so much for joining this webinar to learn a little bit more about how to get the most out of Slack. So really we'll be exploring kind of the power of the platform and how to take advantage of everything that you have access to with Slack. A couple of webinar housekeeping items just before we dive straight in. The first thing is really ask questions and feel empowered to do that. You have a Q&A pod accessible. It looks like this. And we have folks from our customer experience team who are going to be on the line answering those questions in real time. We also have a resource hub on the webinar console. So feel free to click through that. There's additional content there that might be useful for you. We will try to get through a ton of content today, but there's always more to learn. So highly recommend you look through that. And then look out for the recording as a follow-up in email from today's session. I'll do a quick round of introductions. So my name is Mary Francis. I'm a customer success manager here at Slack, and I work out of our New York office. And I'll let Laura introduce herself.
Thanks, Mary Francis. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Domnescu. I'm also a customer success manager with Slack, based in New York. I'm very excited to be here today.
Yeah, we're really glad that everyone is here. We know how precious time is, especially right now. So really, thanks for taking the time. So let's dive in. This is kind of a glance of what we're going to cover off on today. The first thing that we'll go through is just really understanding the importance of shifting team communication to channels in Slack. And this is really all around promoting team collaboration and transparency, which really helps to answer an issue that everyone's dealing with right now, which is alignment. And then we'll move into kind of some tips and tricks on how to keep your team engaged and the importance of keeping workplace culture really strong, especially as we're all working in this extended remote situation and our lives have all changed a little bit. And then the last thing we'll do is round out with some best practices and advanced use cases for how to take those channels to the next level. So the first thing that we want to do is really lay the foundation and understand the value of team collaboration. And to do that, we really need to understand the problem and the challenges that we're all working against today as a digital kind of global workforce. The first thing to understand is that alignment is a fundamental business challenge that is really present for every single organization or company in today's working world. This is something that everyone is up against, and we know this because we actually did a survey called the State of Work, and we put a report together last year, and we actually surveyed 17,000 knowledge workers. And we found that nearly 40% of them felt disconnected from their company and misaligned with the objectives of the business objectives of their company as well. And this is a huge issue because alignment is a key part of how we all feel connected and how we all feel like we're working together towards a common goal. And that's really why we join a company. And we want to take part in that culture, and we want to feel that our role is having a visible impact in actually achieving the goals that that company or the mission that that company is setting out to achieve. So this is really the big question and the big challenge that everyone's facing today. On top of that, we're all remote, and that has changed the way that we work. It's created even more challenges in terms of alignment. So I'm sure all of you have colleagues that are in very different remote working situations. Some are trying to get on calls and execute work with their kids, jumping up and down in the background or in their laps while they're on calls. Some are, in really small one-bedroom apartments in New York City or in really big urban cities. So everyone's landscape is different, and it's created these various challenges for companies. So the first is really that pressure to adapt and execute quickly while we're all working remote so that this doesn't slow us down. And the second thing is really leaders are trying to find ways to make alignment even better. So if that was already a challenge, it's even further complicated now that we're all remote. So how can we stay aligned and coordinated? And then the third is leaders really trying to find ways to really boost company culture and make sure that that stays strong, because that is a key reason why many of us join the companies and organizations that we're with. We want to feel that sense of connection and that sense of togetherness, even if we're not all in the same place. So to kind of further understand the challenges, we also need to kind of look at what's not working and really come to terms with that. So email is not something that is really for the digital workforce of today. It's not up to the moment because it was created about 50 years ago. So each person has a unique view, which really is a partial view. They're not seeing the full landscape of what's going on, whether it's, you know, within their team or a specific project they're working on. The other thing is the sender is in control. So there's less control for everyone on the team to have a voice in that conversation. It's also really slow. It's not mimicking how we work in the office and how we actually speak to each other and get work done. And it's also fundamentally insecure. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when Laura gets into her slides in terms of security. Also, we need to come to terms with the fact that virtual meetings can't fill the gap. I'm sure a lot of you experienced when we first started working from home, everyone was kind of trying to fill the gap of not being together with virtual meetings. And this is really tough because there's no way for us to archive this and have that conversation as a persistent log like you can in Slack. So if someone misses the meeting, you have to kind of spend time to get that person up to speed, which is really not where you should be spending the most of your time. And it's also just exhausting to be back to back. I'm sure you've all been in a situation where you get to the end of the day and you've been in wall-to-wall meetings and you really can't name, you know, one or two things that you've accomplished, but you've been in meetings the whole day. So that's another thing that we need to come to terms with. And then the last thing is software doesn't always play nice together. And we know that we're continuously using more and more apps as a workforce. The average organization or company actually uses over 1,000 applications, and that's steadily increasing. And we know that from our state of work survey and report that we conducted last year. So because we're using apps more and more and we're increasing that usage, we're also increasing the amount that we have to switch between those applications, whether we're using one app to talk to people, one app to pull data, one app to send data. It can get really fatiguing after a while, and it drags on productivity and it's inefficient. It's also not a great way to share information. There's no connection between these tools. So we need some way to band these tools all together and give us one engine that powers them. And I think if you're on this call, a lot of you have you know, experience with Slack. You might be a mature user. So you know that there is a better way to collaborate, and it's Slack. And this is how we're gonna move work forward and faster. And we're also not going to have to compromise on quality. So we're going to be going at a quicker pace, but we're also going to remain aligned and efficient around kind of precision and accuracy as well. And the way that we really do this in Slack and the way you get the most value out of the platform is leveraging the channels. It's a channel-based messaging platform. We actually came on the scene in 2013 to the market with this revolutionary approach around channels because we wanted to put the team first. We recognized that email was this linear form of communication that was building up these very separate silos and repositories of information that didn't have any connection between them. So we created the channel, and that's really what our platform is powered by. We also created ways that you can connect those tools that we talked about. So platform is another aspect of Slack. It's very important for us to be that connector between all the different applications that different lines of businesses and companies need to use during their workday. And we also made sure to make Slack enterprise grade and make sure that it scales across the enterprise because that is something that's super important for everyone's success. And also make sure that it's secure. It's a secure environment. That's something that's of utmost importance to us, which Laura will talk a little bit about later. This is a great visualization that I like to go through when I think about the differences between having conversations in the office, having meetings and working in email versus working in Slack channels. On the left-hand side, you've got a great visualization of all of the different conversations that might happen or take place in the office in various forms. You've got one-to-one interactions, one-to-few interactions, and one-to-many interactions. But a lot of these people are probably spending a ton of time getting all the other people caught up to speed because they're not all in one place. And with a Slack channel, that burden melts away. You don't have all of these back and forth tedious conversations where you're trying to get everyone on the same page. Everyone's already in the same place, in the same room, on the same page, and feeling aligned, which just accelerates work and allows us all to be more aligned and connected. So channels are the place for work, and you're able to organize these by topic. So If you have a project that you're working on cross-functionally, you can have a channel with that group. You can also have a team channel where you're checking in on a daily basis and staying connected with your team. You can have a channel around an initiative. So at Slack, we have a lot of company objectives that we create cross-functional task forces for. So we have channels for those initiatives, and we actually realize that work from start to finish in those channels. And then you can also have channels with customers. So we'll talk a little bit about external shared channels, and you can also have channels around specific accounts. So if you're working in a customer-facing role, you can have an internal channel to talk through all the work and all the operations happening on that account. The main takeaway here is that everything has a space. You can kind of think about Slack as your kitchen. And if you're trying to get dinner ready, you're having people come over, maybe you and your family are in the kitchen making dinner, and you're all kind of trying to get different things done, but you know where everything is. So you're able to be in the same space and really get things done efficiently because of that organization and because everyone has a space to be on the same page. And go to ask questions, you can share a file, or even just get caught up in channels, which is really nice to get caught up without even having to ask a question. So there's really kind of 4 key benefits to working in channels, and the transformation that we start to see when people work in channels is that teams are able to stay more aligned as priorities change. So things, as we know, in this new reality that we're living in, things change really quickly, and we live in a fast-paced environment. So we need to be able to stay aligned and communicate priorities as they change, either through announcement channels as an entire company or on a team and functional level. Another key benefit of channels and kind of a transformation that we start to see is that teams are able to focus more, and they're able to protect their time and attention because there are granular notification settings that Slack allows you to set on your personal preference level and also on a channel specific level. And really all of that makes us work faster. So work starts to happen faster because we're not siloed in email, and we have these spaces where we can make quick decisions and loop in the right people when needed. And lastly, it helps build culture. It actually improves culture with open lines of communication and fostering transparency so that you're really able to connect with people on a deeper level and show a bit of your personality in your channels. I'm gonna pause really quick because we do have a question coming in, and it is there a limit to the number of channels you can create or messages that you can send in Slack? This is a really great question, and the answer is there is not a limit to the amount of channels that you can create in Slack. However, depending on what plan you're on, there may be a limitation on the amount of messages that can be stored in a channel. So that channel history, the amount of archive you're able to have. So definitely get in touch with a representative if you have questions about that, because it does kind of change depending on what plan you're on. All right, so moving into a couple of examples of how we see this manifest itself in channels. We see these kind of key benefits come to life. The first is all around alignment. So on the right-hand side, you can see a workflow that's been created for a project channel. So you can imagine people are from different parts of the business working together in this channel to realize a certain stream of work. And we have added a workflow to this channel, which is called a daily team stand-up. This is a great way to limit the number of meetings that you're having on a daily basis, but also still feel really connected as a team and feel like you're crowdsourcing knowledge and removing any blockers for team members that might be struggling with certain challenges. So the first one is, what are you working on today? Are there any blockers or things you need help on? And then the last one question here, and with the green heart, is my favorite. And it's really just checking in on how people are holding up, which is really important right now. Another example of how you can stay aligned as kind of priorities shift and change with channels is right here on the right-hand side. So it looks like we're in a platform team channel, and Max is sharing actually a message from Julie that was posted in an announcements channel for the entire product organization. And Julie's really outlining how the company goals have shifted given some recent changes, and she's outlining each objective. And Max is able to just take this message and quickly drop it into his platform team channel, which is where he has his kind of close-knit group of direct reports. And he's able to say, we're going to talk about this in our next meeting. Please post questions here if you have them, which is really nice because all of the questions he gets allows him time to kind of answer them in his own mind and kind of reconcile or work with the business to answer them, and come prepared to that next meeting to have a really strategic discussion around those questions. Another great way to use the channels functionality and kind of step up your game with channels is actually just feeling empowered to mention people and looping people in to make a really quick decision. So this is how that decision or approval process can become accelerated with Slack. You can see here Sarah and Lisa are having a conversation in the channel, and Lisa is asking for Sarah's input, and she's made sure to mention Sarah so that she gets a push notification around that. And she's also, Lisa's actually throwing an emoji reaction onto this message to let Lisa know that she has seen this message and is addressing the question. So it's a really great way to just automate that decision process. And you can see here, if you wanted to take that a step further, you could even thread onto that message and provide feedback or additional input that you need to kind of collaborate on before a decision can be made. You're also able to get work done faster by integrating the different platforms or tools that you're working with. So here's an example of someone actually working in an externally shared channel, which we'll talk about in a second. But someone's working in a shared channel and they're sending through a proposal. So Matt is sending through a proposal and he's mentioning someone in that channel to take a look at it and review it and provide feedback. And he has this integration here, so he gets a nice preview, which Laura will talk a little bit about. But he automatically knows that 8 people have seen this, 2 people are aligned with this already. They've given their go ahead with that green check mark. And he can also see that there's 5 replies. So he can click into those and understand maybe what feedback there is and if he needs to make changes or send anything to legal to really expedite this process and get work done faster. And then we get to kind of boosting team culture through channels. So a couple of examples here. At the top, you've got an executive Ask Me Anything channel. We actually have one of these within Slack. So this is a great way for us to, as employees, to really connect with our executive team and feel like we have a space to ask questions when they arise. So you can see that Adam has asked a question around election day and potentially making that a holiday. And you can automatically see, the executives that are in this channel can take a mental note that 47 people have added the plus sign to this message. So it's probably something they want to address and really take seriously. So you can also see that there's 20 replies and you can kind of look through that feedback. So a great way to level the playing field in terms of access to leaders and really feeling like you have a voice. On the bottom here, you have a workflow that's been added to a channel, which Laura will go into in a bit more detail. But this is really a great way to just check in with people, have a fun channel where people can share their work from home best practices and tips and tricks, just to really kind of foster culture and togetherness during this remote time. I also really am a big believer in starting kudos channels because we need to celebrate our shared success, especially now more than ever. We need to feel that we're recognized for the work that we're doing, even though we're not all together in the office. So you can see Rachel here is posting a shout out to her team. She's created a kudos channel. I highly recommend that you guys do this as well. All right, so to kind of round us out with channels, we're gonna talk through kind of just the flexibility and scalability of channels and how you realize value over time. So this is a really great visualization that shows you the different layers to how you're messaging in Slack. So in green, you have kind of those one-to-one or one-to-several interactions and DMs or multi-person DMs. And then when you get into blue, you have some of that channel interaction. So private channels, maybe where you're working with sensitive information, public channels where you're working across teams, and you're really allowing the rest of the organization to have visibility into those channels and be able to search for content through those channels and have that rich repository of information. You also have the ability to add guests into channels. Maybe you have interns for the summer and you want them to be in certain channels but not access the entire workspace. And then you get into this gray area up top where you're starting to share maybe channels across different organizations internally or workspaces that you have, or have company-wide announcement channels or company-wide channels where things are being pushed to the entire organization. And then this top one here is external collaboration. So the ability to actually share a channel with an organization that exists outside of your company. So a great example of this is on this diagram here on the right. So you can see Acme Inc. actually has a shared channel where they're connecting with an external supplier and an external design agency. So the great thing about Slack is that you're able to collaborate just the way you do internally with those external partners, because we really realize the importance of that network to getting work done. So I do want to pause here because we have, it looks like, a question around shared channels coming in. It says, if I have a paid Slack account and I want to create a shared channel with my marketing agency who uses Slack for free, is that possible? That's a really great question. Shared channels and external collaboration within Slack, specifically shared channels, is really for the paid plans. So if you want to share a channel with another organization outside of your company, they would just need to have some sort of paid plan for Slack. So definitely get in touch with us if you have additional questions around that, but that's a really great question. All right, here are some of the benefits that shared channels can provide those relationships with your business partners. It kind of spans, there's 3 examples here across 3 different departments. So sales and customer success, I personally could not imagine doing my day-to-day job without access to my shared channels with my customers. It really allows me to build those strategic relationships by providing real-time support. Similarly, the customer support angle, so if you have a customer support team, it's really easy for them to create shared channels with their with top customers. So Fastly is actually a great example of this. They built a strategy with their customer support team off the back of the shared channels product release a few years ago, and they're actually servicing their top tier strategic customers with shared channels from a support perspective. And then supply chain and logistics is a really big one as well. This is really a way for those teams to optimize operations in real time and be able to triage those complex issues with the right people. So a good example of this is actually Portillo's out of Chicago, who I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. They actually use shared channels to do just that, to really optimize their operations on the ground and speak to their other kind of partners who are helping manage that, so they can toggle on and off delivery capabilities and functionalities as maybe things arise like COVID, or even if there's storms that are causing road closures. So really bridging that gap and allowing them to collaborate externally just as they do internally. And just to round us out here before I pass it off to Laura, I do want to go over the Cole Haan customer story. And I'm sure everyone is familiar with Cole Haan. They're bringing great footwear to the market in a really innovative way. And they've been doing that since 1928. And a couple of things that are really important to them are they do really value innovation. So they want to be first on the scene, first to market, but they also really value craftsmanship and tradition. So channels really allow them to provide the visibility and transparency that they need to deliver on both of those things. So they need to deliver kind of that great customer experience and that innovative product without compromising on quality. So their brand design and their product teams are using Slack to really work hand in hand on those seasonal campaigns. So they have historical logs of all of the campaigns they've already run, and they have channels for the project teams that are developing the new ones. And then they also have external shared channels with those different partners who are helping execute those campaigns and helping get those products to market. So it has actually decreased the time that they need to get to market. So yeah, definitely read more about this and get in touch with a representative if you want to chat further about customer stories. So I'm going to pass it over to Laura without further ado.
Great. Thanks so much, Mary Frances, and thank you for a great overview. For the second half of the presentation, we want to spend a little bit of time to delve into some best practices and advanced use cases. And we'll take a special focus for that on the Slack platform. The reason behind it is that we think that leveraging the Slack platform is going to help you increase your ROI, not just with Slack, but with the rest of your tool stack as well. And Mary Frances hinted at this before. The reason why we really value the Slack platform so much is because if you look at the state of work today, We realize that on average, organizations use more than 1,000 different services. And some of these might be across the board, like productivity tools, but some of them are very specific to some department and functions. And this comes from a best of breed approach, where the different teams pick the tools that make most sense for the way they do their work. But while this approach comes with a lot of advantages when it comes to flexibility, it comes with some serious caveats as well. And namely, the caveat is that because of these different tools and this fragmented tool stack, that the information that we need to have access to get our jobs done remains siloed in different platforms and in different teams, which means that users have difficulty accessing it in real time. And it also means that enterprises really underutilize their investments. And where we think Slack can come in and help is really remove some of these silos and act as this cross-functional bridge between your different apps. You can do that by leveraging out-of-the-box Slack apps, by leveraging our APIs for custom applications, or customizing different workflows. But what's great here is that you don't need any additional licensing to connect the tools that you already have access to. And best of all of these integrations will work not just on your desktop app, but on your mobile apps as well. So to give you a high-level overview of how some of these integrations look like, you can have rich unfurls directly in your channel. So whether it's a team channel or public channel or a project channel, you'll have a preview of some of the information exchanged by these apps. You can also get important alerts into your channels. Some of them might be calendar reminders for a meeting that maybe is coming up in 5 minutes or a minute, but for example, you can pipe in PagerDuty notifications into your customer team channel, letting them know that there's been an outage and they can expect an increase in customer support requests. Even better, with these alerts, you can actually act on information directly from Slack, so without leaving the place where you're already doing your job. And you can also use your external tools like Google Drive, let's say, without leaving Slack. So you can perform external actions from here as well. And last but not least, you can customize different workflows that make sense for the way your team works directly from Slack. And I'll cover all of these in a little bit more detail. So at a very high level, you can think of 3 buckets of tools that you can integrate with the Slack platform. The first of them being productivity tools. So once again, these are tools most likely used by your entire organization to progress work and increase transparency. And they can be things like email, calendar, or even web conferencing. One of my favorite ones is the calendar integration with Slack that is compatible both with Google and Outlook. This sends me calendar invites or calendar notifications directly in Slack, and I can also respond to these invites directly from Slack. If my calendar invite includes a link to a web conference, I can also start that meeting directly from the calendar reminder. But what I like most about these calendar integrations is that they actually sync my Slack status with my calendar availability. So I no longer have to go and proactively update my Slack status to let my colleagues know that I'm in a meeting. But as long as my calendar is up to date, so will my Slack status be. And I find that especially now in a remote work, when I can no longer glance over to see if my colleague is at their desk, I can simply look at their calendar status, which again automatically syncs up. I mentioned web conferencing a couple of times. Calling integration is a great one, and it's really flexible. You can essentially start or join calls, whether you're using Zoom or WebEx or even Microsoft Teams directly from Slack. You can even set one of these as your default calling provider. So what that does is actually replace the calling button in a Slack channel or a direct message to Zoom, for example, and automatically start a Zoom call when you press that call button. And specifically with Zoom, this is one of the most recent updates. You can actually use Zoom phone to call numbers directly from Slack if that is available to you. And let's not forget about Slack calls. You may not have access to Zoom or WebEx. And in that case, the Slack native calls are a great way to have a quick conversation, right? For those instances when it's easier to hop on a quick call instead of writing things in channel, you can have a Slack call with up to 15 participants that'll give you the ability to have video, voice, and screen sharing. And obviously everyone's favorite, you can also send emojis and brief messages during the call if you need to. File sharing, I would say, is probably one of the biggest advantages of integrations, and they do a great job of increasing productivity and transparency around your team. These are compatible, as some examples, with Google Drive and OneDrive. And you can do things like sharing and granting access to files directly from Slack. So you don't even need to leave your channel. And if I can give you an example, right? Mary Frances and I worked on the presentation together. Mary Frances started a file in G Drive, which she then shared with us in the channel where we're all planning for this webinar. The moment she shared the link to this file, Google Drive did a match between the members in the channel and the people who had access to the file Mary Frances shared, and then sent a message only visible to Mary Frances that said, hey, not everyone who's in this channel has access to the file you just shared. What would you like to do? And then Mary Frances has a drop-down available to her that allows her to give either viewing rights, editing rights, or comment rights to everyone in the channel. So without even having to leave Slack, she was able to access Google Drive. Once I go through my side of the presentation and I update my slides and my content, I can leave comments for Mary Frances. I can assign tasks to her. And when I do that, Mary Frances gets alerts directly in Slack, and she can resolve those or make additional comments in a message thread. So once again, without her having to leave Slack. And what I like most about having these integrations with Google Drive in OneDrive is that these contribute to the organizational knowledge that you build over time, because all of the files that you share in channels are going to be searchable in the future. So if at one point you want to do a retro of your project, you'll be able to search not just messages, but all the files you shared. And if you later onboard teammates that need to have access to this information, they'll be able to self-serve with a very quick search instead of you having to forward important materials to them. And I'll pause here. I see there's a question from Dave that says, my team doesn't use Google Drive. Can I upload Word or Excel files instead? And the answer is absolutely yes. You can upload native files, whether they're Word documents, PDFs, or even JPEG and images in a Slack channel. And much like with everything else, your team then can swarm around this document that is shared and respond in thread if they need to. The second category of tools that you can leverage when it comes to the Slack platform are departmental tools. So these might be tools that are not used across the board, but they're specific to a certain department, right? So your sales team might be using Salesforce to update customer records. Your customer support team might be using Zendesk to respond to customer inquiries. And maybe your PR team is using Twitter for social media communication. Some of these examples that are great that I wanted to highlight are the Workday integration, which I leverage a lot because it allows me to do things without logging into Workday at all. If I open up a conversation with a Workday bot in my Slack instance, I can check my time off balance, and I can even submit PTO requests. A lot of the times I'll join a cross-functional project and I'm working with teammates who I haven't spoken to before, so I can look them up really quickly in Workday to look at their background, their area of expertise, and where they fit in with the overall organization. And my favorite about Workday is that I can actually submit anytime feedback for my coworkers. So if I want to give thanks to someone who went above and beyond, or if I want to give praise, I can also do that directly from Slack. One other integration that is really popular with Agile teams is the integration with the Jira Cloud app. This is great because it allows you to stay up to date with any changes that have been made to your Jira tickets. So any updates will be piped into your channel once again where you're already doing your work. And you can also take action on these Jira updates, once again, directly from Slack. But what's great is that, say you find a message or a file in a channel that your team is not aware of, you can attach that message to your Jira issue. And this way, you just ensure that you increase visibility and transparency across your entire teams. And the third category of tools are the custom ones. And there are two ways in which you can do this. You can obviously leverage the Slack APIs to connect just deep and customized solutions that leverage your organization's internal tools. Or you can also look at automating workflows. So for those, processes and tasks that are repetitive and time consuming, you can actually automate those in separate sequence of steps based on how your team works today. And I want to share a great example with you of a custom application built by Hearst Magazines. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with Hearst. They oversee 25 different brands, including Cosmopolitan and Esquire. And they produce over 2,500 pieces of content on a daily basis, which means that their staff needs to see how this content performs in real time. Whether it's their leadership team, their publishers, or even their sales staff, they need to see what's popular and what's doing well. Before creating this custom application, the Hearst Magazine's staff would need to access information from 7 different types of resources in 40 types of different customizable reports. And what they did to alleviate some of that friction and some of that siloed communication is actually create a bot called Hans, which is short for Hearst Answers, which will actually answer and provide this insight directly in a Slack channel. So someone at Hearst can ask, what's the top performing story in Cosmo today? And Hans will surface those answers. And what's great about this type of integration is that it not only saves employees an average of 1 hour per day, but it actually helps them see what sort of stories and products drive online revenue best. And it also helps them make really informed decisions. Another way of customizing some of these tools, I mentioned, if you don't necessarily need to create a bot, you can actually leverage the Slack native workflow builder, which is a visual tool that allows you to select a trigger event, which then unleashes a sequence of steps. And that trigger event can be as simple as someone joining a channel like Melissa did here, or it can be someone reacting with a certain emoji to a channel, which then again unleashes just a sequence of steps. There are a lot of great use cases to consider for workflows. Something like, let's say, onboarding a new teammate. You can send them a welcome message that maybe surfaces important information for them to know. It lets them know what the etiquette is for Slack at your team and helps them access information so they can get caught up to speed. Another great example would be maybe triaging requests. So if you want to have a standard templatized way in which everyone submits their questions in a channel, you can also create a form with Workflow Builder. And what's great here is that once you start using these workflows, you can draw some inspiration from these templates that are going to be available in your Slack platform. And I see there's a question here from Brianna, which says, do you need to know how to code to use Workflow Builder? Absolutely not. I did not know how to code, and I've created many, many workflows at Slack before. And actually this slide is the best representation of that. All you have to do is decide the use case and what you want to leverage the workflow for. And then once you simply walk through all the steps that Workflow Builder makes available for you. So you choose your trigger event, which in this case, if you want to onboard a new teammate, would be someone new joining a channel. And if you think about it, if someone new joins a channel, you probably want them to set an introductory note to the rest of the team. And if that's the case, then you create a form, you fill out a form, and then you simply fill in your questions. Once the person submits the form, then you also send them a welcome message like we did for Melissa in one of the previous slides, highlighting important information for them to know. And the last thing I want to call out when it comes to the Slack platform, if you're intrigued about the platform and you want to learn more about ways in which you can leverage it, definitely check out the Slack platform community at slackcommunity.com. It's a global network with more than 75 local chapters. It has thousands of participants who meet on a regular basis to figure out ways in which they can progress their work, exchange best practices, and learn new skills. So now that we talked about how to leverage channels to exchange critical information, how to leverage integrations, I want to spend a minute to talk about security and compliance, because we know this is paramount at Slack. And there are a few things to highlight. The most important one is that security is obviously our top priority, and we do that without sacrificing any of the product functionality. First and foremost, when it comes to compliance, we meet and exceed some of the most broadly recognized security standards. And there are a lot of solutions that help you address compliance requirements, whether that's HIPAA, whether it's FedRAMP, or even GDPR. When it comes to operations, really security is core to our culture, and we use industry-leading best practices to keep all of our data safe. And last but not least, we understand that every company is different, which is why we give you access to a lot of capabilities that allow you to really control who has access to your data and how you want to keep it secure. A little bit more detail around the capabilities and some of the things that I want to highlight. These are by no means exhaustive, but they're good highlights. When it comes to identity and access controls, you can set things like session duration, which dictates that after a certain period of time of your choosing, everyone in your Slack instance will be automatically logged out and have to log in to go through the re-authentication steps. Or you can set a two-factor authentication, which says that in addition to an email and a password, every user will have to use this unique code to log into Slack, and this can be applied both to your full members and also to external collaborators like guests. When it comes to device management, you have very granular access here. So you can, for example, choose to use the Slack for EMM app, which will move your Slack app into a managed container. Or you can altogether block file downloads and message copy on mobile devices. And last but not least, it's worth highlighting that by default, we encrypt all data, both at rest and at transit. But you can take that even a step further. If you would like to use your own keys to encrypt your messages and files, you can take advantage of EKM, which is our enterprise key management feature. That again gives you very granular controls down to the message level. Or if you're using a DLP solution, you can integrate that with the Slack Discovery APIs just to control the type of content that is shared within Slack. So with that said, I know we covered a lot today, and we want to thank you again for spending the time with us. So if you take just a few things away, we hope it's these 4 things. One is that shifting team communication into channels will pay enormous dividends, and it's really going to help you increase collaboration and transparency within your teams and across teams. 2 is that working remotely makes it more important than ever for your teams to stay engaged and for your workplace culture to stay really strong. The 3rd is that extending your use of Slack to external partners, customers, and vendors will also increase productivity and collaboration. And 4 is that really we encourage you to integrate the rest of your software with the Slack platform, because this is going to increase your investment altogether. And definitely take advantage of Workflow Builder just to automate some of these daily routine mundane tasks. So once again, Mary Frances, I want to say thank you for spending the time with us. If you have any questions around how you can bring some of these capabilities to your workspace, or if you're curious how this plays into your specific plan, please get in touch with us at slack.com/contact-sales, and someone on our team will get back to you.